Hey everyone, welcome back to another deep dive. And today we're tackling something pretty fundamental, I think, intelligence. But we're not just talking about like how much you know or your IQ. We're going to be exploring how intelligence actually emerges,
Yeah.
both in our human brains and in the world of AI. And to help us unpack this, we're going to be diving into some pretty fascinating material that centers on this concept of algorithmic growth.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about this is that it moves beyond just raw processing power
Right.
or, the amount of information you can store.
Yeah.
It's really about looking at how information unfolds and develops over time
Right.
to create the foundation for intelligence itself.
Okay, so the big question we're going to be exploring in this deep dive is this. What if the key to intelligence isn't just about how much thinking power you have at any given moment?
Well,
What about how that thinking ability actually grows through a process?
Mhm.
Kind of like how a tree doesn't just appear fully formed.
Right.
It starts as a seed and develops over time.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to illustrate this a little bit, let's rewind the clock
Okay.
way back
Okay, take me back.
to the very beginnings of artificial intelligence.
I'm ready.
So it's 1957.
Okay.
The world is still recovering from World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And this political scientist by the name of Herbert Simon makes a pretty shocking claim.
Okay.
He says he's created a thinking machine.
A thinking machine.
And this was mind-blowing at the time
Yeah.
because, computers were seen as these giant calculators,
Yeah.
good for crunching numbers, but not for, actual thinking.
Right.
And what makes it even more interesting, I think, is that he wasn't even a computer scientist.
A political scientist
Yeah.
revolutionizing AI. Okay, now my assumptions are being challenged here.
Right.
What was he doing working on AI in the first place?
So Simon was fascinated by bureaucracy,
Okay.
and specifically how decisions are made in large organizations.
Hmm.
And he realized something really insightful, that both individually and in groups, humans don't always make perfectly logical decisions.
Of course not.
Right. We use shortcuts, which we now call heuristics,
Physics?
to deal with all the complexity in the world.
Okay, so these heuristics, can you break those down a bit more? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, so think of heuristics as mental rules of thumb.
Okay.
They help us make quick judgments without having to analyze every single detail.
Right.
So, for example, let's say you hear about someone named Steve.
Okay.
And Steve is described as tidy, introverted, and loves detail.
Okay, Steve sounds like a librarian.
Right. Most people would jump to that conclusion.
Yep.
But statistically, there are far more engineers in the world, librarians.
Interesting.
So our brains, using what's called the representativeness heuristic,
Okay.
latch on to the most obvious fit, even if it's not the most statistically likely outcome.
So our brains are kind of tricking us in a way
Yeah,
to make these snap judgments.
right. They're trying to find patterns
Yeah.
and make quick connections,
Yeah.
even if they're not always accurate.
But if they can be so misleading, why do we even rely on these heuristics in the first place?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. So psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky
Oh, yeah.
show that these cognitive biases, which are often a result of our reliance on heuristics, aren't actually flaws in our system.
Okay.
They're more like features.
Okay.
They're a natural outcome of our brain's algorithmic growth.
Hold on. Algorithmic growth. I think
Yeah.
we need to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean in terms of our brains?
So think of your brain as a constantly evolving system. It's not static. Every new experience, every piece of information you encounter
Yeah.
gets woven into the fabric of your brain. It's this continuous process of learning and adaptation.
So it's like our brains are constantly building upon themselves.
Right.
Almost like a snowball rolling downhill, gathering more and more snow as it goes.
Exactly. And the more we experience, the more we rely on those patterns and connections that our brains have built.
Right.
And it becomes harder to take in information that challenges
Right.
those
Wow.
pre-existing patterns.
We get stuck in our ways.
We get stuck in our ways.
Yeah.
We become more comfortable with the familiar,
Right.
even if it means holding on to outdated or biased views.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've all been there stuck in our ways, resistant to change.
Yeah.
It's like our brains prefer the comfort of what we already know,
Right.
even if it's not entirely accurate.
Exactly.
So how does this algorithmic growth actually play out in our lives? Can you give us an example?
Yeah. So picture a young child's brain,
Okay.
like a sponge,
Yeah.
soaking up new information constantly. Everything is a surprise,
Right.
a new pattern to recognize.
Yeah.
This is why children are so curious and open to exploring.
Yeah.
But as we grow older, familiar patterns start to dominate.
Right.
Our brains become more efficient at processing information, but they also become less curious and more set in their ways.
Yeah, so it's like we trade off that childlike curiosity for the efficiency of experience.
Exactly.
It's natural, but it also means we can get stuck in our own little mental bubbles.
Yeah, and this brings up an important question. If our individual experiences so profoundly shape how we process information, how do we ever change our minds about deeply ingrained beliefs, even when we're presented with evidence that contradicts those beliefs?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We all know how hard it is to change someone's mind, especially when it comes to deeply held beliefs. So how does algorithmic growth explain that stubbornness?
It all comes down to the history track of information in the brain. So it's like each piece of information has a unique backstory, a record of how it was acquired and integrated into our existing web of knowledge. And this means that the same piece of information can be interpreted in completely different ways by different people based on their own personal history tracks.
So our brains aren't just comparing new information to like a neutral database. Right. Every new bit of information is being filtered through the lens of our past experiences. It's almost as if each brain has its own personalized algorithm for making sense of the world.
That's a great way to put it. And this brings us to a pretty fascinating thought experiment. If intelligence is a product of this algorithmic growth, could we apply those same principles to grow complex systems beyond the realm of biology? What if instead of building a car piece by piece, we could actually grow it atom by atom, using the principles of algorithmic growth?
Whoa, okay, now we're getting into some serious science fiction territory here. A car that grows like a living organism, how would that even work?
It may sound far-fetched, but it was an idea that scientists seriously considered.
Really?
So Eric Drexler, a pioneer in the field of nanotechnology, imagined a future where molecular machines could build objects atom by atom, even replicating themselves in the process. So he envisioned growing anything we need from raw materials, much like we grow plants. It would be like programming a code for growth, a set of instructions to guide the assembly of a car from its most basic components.
That's a wild idea, but I imagine there must be some major challenges to making that a reality.
You're absolutely right. The biggest hurdle is the inherent unpredictability of algorithmic growth. So let me explain. Even if you could perfectly map out the genetic code of, say, an apple tree, you couldn't predict every single detail of how that tree would grow, the shape of its branches, the size of its apples. All those details would be influenced by the environment, random mutations, the complex interactions of countless biological processes.
So even with a perfect blueprint, there's an element of chance, of variation that makes the final outcome impossible to fully predict. It's like trying to control the evolution of a new species.
Exactly. And the more complex the system, the greater the unpredictability. Trying to grow a car would be like trying to orchestrate the evolution of a whole new species. You might be able to guide the process to some extent. But you could never fully control every detail of the final result.
Okay, so growing a car from scratch is probably not going to happen anytime soon.
Probably not.
But what about simulating that growth process? Could we create a virtual car that grows and evolves in a computer simulation? Kind of like a video game where the car designs itself.
That question takes us right to the heart of the relationship between biological and artificial intelligence. So remember we talked about whole brain emulation? The concept of scanning a human brain to create a perfect digital copy?
The ultimate brain backup.
The ultimate brain backup. But the challenge lies in capturing the sheer volume of information contained within a brain. It's not just the physical structure, but the dynamic interplay of chemicals, electrical signals, and the history track of experiences that have shaped that brain's unique wiring.
So even if we could map every neuron and every connection in a brain, we might still be missing crucial pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly.
It's not just about the hardware. It's about the software.
The software.
The experiences, the individual history track that makes each brain unique.
Think of it like trying to recreate a symphony. Just by analyzing the individual notes played by each instrument. You might capture the melody, but you'd lose the nuances of timing, the interplay between instruments, and the emotional impact of the performance. A brain is more than the sum of its parts.
Right.
It's a dynamic system that has emerged through this process of algorithmic growth.
Right.
And that process is incredibly difficult to replicate in a simulation.
Okay. I'm starting to see the challenge here. Whole brain emulation is clearly a long way off.
Yeah. But what about those brain-computer interfaces that
Yeah.
we're seeing more of these days?
Right.
Things like Elon Musk's Neuralink.
Yeah.
Those seem to be getting closer to reality.
They are, and that's where things get really exciting.
Okay.
So these interfaces are being developed to actually enhance our capabilities,
Okay.
allowing our brains to interact directly with computers. Imagine controlling a prosthetic limb with just your thoughts.
Oh.
Or accessing information from the internet instantaneously.
Okay. So we're talking about blurring the lines between our minds and the digital world.
Exactly.
But even with those advances, we still can't escape
Right.
the principles of algorithmic growth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not like plugging in a USB drive and instantly downloading new skills.
Right.
Think about it this way. If you never had arms,
Okay.
and suddenly you have a prosthetic arm controlled by your thoughts,
Yeah.
it's going to take time and effort to learn how to use it effectively.
Of course.
Your brain needs to rewire itself.
Create new neural pathways to integrate this new ability.
It's like learning a new language or a musical instrument.
Exactly.
It takes practice and dedication for our brains to master something new.
Yeah. And this learning process becomes even more complex
Right.
when we're talking about interfacing with artificial intelligence.
Okay.
So remember how we discussed that our brains store information
Yeah.
as these decentralized patterns,
Right.
not neat and tidy bits like a computer?
Yes, it's like our brains are these intricate webs of interconnected information constantly evolving and adapting.
So the question becomes, how do we bridge the gap between that messy organic system and the more structured digital world of AI?
Right.
How does an AI interpret the signals from a brain
Right.
that doesn't think in ones and zeros?
That's a fascinating challenge. It's almost like trying to translate between two completely different languages, each with its own unique structure and logic.
It's a problem that researchers are grappling with right now. And it highlights why understanding algorithmic growth is so crucial,
Right.
both in biological and artificial systems.
Yeah.
If we truly want to create a seamless partnership between humans and AI, we need to figure out how these two systems will learn and adapt to each other over time.
It's a two-way street.
It is.
It's clear that we've only just scratched the surface of this topic.
Yeah.
But before we move on, can you sum up the big takeaways from this first part of our deep dive?
Yeah. So the key point here is that we're starting to look at intelligence in a whole new way.
Okay.
We're moving beyond just thinking about how much information a brain can hold,
Right.
and instead focusing on how that information is acquired, organized, and woven into the fabric of our minds.
Okay.
And this process of algorithmic growth, this ongoing evolution of our brains, influences not just how we think, but also how we perceive the world, how we make decisions, and even how we interact with technology.
That's a fascinating concept, and one that I think has profound implications for the future of both human and artificial intelligence. But we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
And there's so much more to explore. We'll be back in just a moment with part 2 of this deep dive,
Right.
where we'll delve even deeper into the mind-blowing world of brain-machine interfaces and the potential for merging with artificial intelligence.
Looking forward to it.
Don't go anywhere.
It's amazing to think that these ideas we've been discussing, these futuristic concepts, are actually starting to become reality. We're not just theorizing about brain-machine interfaces anymore.
Right.
They're being actively developed and tested.
Okay, so fill me in.
Yeah.
What's happening right now in the world of brain-machine interfaces?
Well, one of the most exciting ventures, I think, is Neuralink,
Neuralink. Yeah.
a company founded by Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And their goal is to create a high-bandwidth brain-machine interface.
Okay.
Basically, a superhighway for information to flow between your brain and external devices.
So it's like building a bridge between our brains and computers.
Exactly.
What could we actually do with that kind of connection?
The potential applications are mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Right now, the focus is on helping people with paralysis
Okay.
regain control of their limbs. Imagine a person with quadriplegia
Yeah.
using just their thoughts to control a robotic arm
Wow.
or even walk again.
That would be absolutely revolutionary.
Yeah.
Giving people back mobility and independence. What a powerful use of technology.
And that's just the beginning.
Okay.
As the technology improves, we're talking about applications that sound like science fiction.
Okay.
Imagine accessing the internet with the speed of thought, or controlling your smart home just by thinking about it.
Okay, telekinesis in our homes.
Right.
That is straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Right.
But even with all these advancements, we're still bound by those principles of algorithmic growth.
Absolutely.
Our brains will still need to adapt to these interfaces.
It's not like plugging in a USB drive and instantly downloading new skills.
Right.
Think about it this way. If you've never had arms,
Okay.
and suddenly you have a prosthetic arm controlled by your thoughts,
Yeah.
it's going to take time and effort
Sure.
to learn how to use it effectively.
Of course.
Your brain needs to rewire itself, create new neural pathways to integrate this new ability.
Right. It's like learning a new language.
Exactly.
Or a musical instrument.
Right.
It takes practice and dedication for our brains to master something new.
And this learning process becomes even more complex when we're talking about interfacing with artificial intelligence.
Okay. How so?
Well, remember how we discussed that our brains store information as these decentralized patterns?
Yes, it's like those intricate webs of interconnected information constantly evolving and adapting.
So the question becomes, how do we bridge the gap between that messy organic system
Right.
and the more structured digital world of AI?
It's like we're talking about two completely different languages here.
Exactly. Each with its own unique structure and logic. And that's a problem that researchers are grappling with right now. And it really highlights why understanding algorithmic growth is so crucial,
Right.
both in biological and artificial systems,
Yeah.
to create a true partnership between humans and AI, where the two can work seamlessly together. We need to figure out how both sides
Right.
will adapt and learn from each other.
So it's not just about the technology itself. It's
Right.
about understanding how our brains and AI can co-evolve
Yeah.
and grow together.
It's a two-way street.
It's a two-way street.
Okay.
Okay, this leads us to maybe one of the most intriguing and perhaps controversial
Yeah.
aspects of brain-machine interfaces,
Right.
and that is this idea of merging with AI.
Merging with AI. It's a concept that has captured the imagination of many,
Okay.
including Elon Musk himself. He suggested that brain-machine interfaces could one day allow us to merge with AI.
Merge, what does that even mean?
Right.
Are we talking about uploading our consciousnesses into a computer?
Well, it's not entirely clear what this merging would look like in practice,
Okay.
but the very idea raises some profound questions.
Such as?
What does it mean to be human in an age where our minds can intertwine with AI? What happens to our sense of self, our identity, our values?
Yeah, these are big questions
They are.
that touch on the very core of our humanity.
Right.
It's both exciting and a little unsettling to contemplate such a future.
It challenges our traditional understanding of what it means to be human.
Right.
And this is where I think the concept of algorithmic growth becomes even more important.
Okay, how so?
If our identities are shaped by our experiences, memories, or unique history tracks,
Right.
what happens when those tracks become intertwined
Yeah.
with the experiences and memories of an AI? Do we become something entirely new? A hybrid of human and machine?
It's mind-boggling to think about.
It is.
Are we evolving into something beyond our current understanding of human?
It's a possibility that we need to consider seriously. But maybe this blurring of boundaries isn't something to fear, but to embrace.
Okay.
Throughout history, humans have always sought to push the boundaries
Right.
of what's possible.
We invented the wheel, we developed a language, we created the internet.
Exactly. We're constantly striving to transcend our limitations and explore new frontiers.
So you're saying that merging with AI could be seen as the next step in our evolutionary journey?
It's certainly a possibility. And if we approach it with careful thought, ethical awareness,
Right.
and a deep understanding of algorithmic growth,
Yeah.
perhaps we can shape a future where humans and AI collaborate to solve some of the world's biggest challenges, unlocking new levels of creativity and innovation that we can't even imagine yet.
That's a hopeful vision.
Yeah.
But it also brings up some important ethical considerations.
Of course.
If we're talking about merging with AI, who decides what kind of AI we merge with?
Right.
What values will it embody?
Those are critical questions.
Yeah.
And it underscores the need for a diverse range of voices in the development and governance of these technologies.
Right.
We need to ensure that AI is aligned with human values,
Yeah.
promoting fairness, justice, and the well-being of all.
It's like we're not just shaping the future of technology,
Right.
but the future of humanity itself. That's a huge responsibility.
It is.
Yeah.
We need to approach these advancements with humility and caution, recognizing the immense power of algorithmic growth to shape our minds, our societies, and our very understanding of what it means to be intelligent beings in a rapidly changing world.
We've covered so much ground in this conversation.
We have.
From the mechanics of brain-machine interfaces to the philosophical implications of merging with AI.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's clear that we're on the cusp of something truly extraordinary.
I agree.
But before we wrap up, I have one last question that's been lingering in my mind.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about algorithmic growth in the context of intelligence. But I'm curious, how does this concept apply to other aspects of our lives? Our relationships, our communities, even our planet as a whole?
That's a fantastic question, and one that could easily fill another entire deep dive.
Yeah.
But here's something to consider. Just as our brains are constantly growing and adapting based on our experiences, so too are our relationships, our communities, and even our planet.
So you're saying that algorithmic growth isn't just a biological phenomenon?
It's a fundamental principle that governs how systems evolve and interact over time. Think of a forest ecosystem.
Okay.
Every tree, every animal, every microorganism is constantly adapting to its surroundings, interacting with others, and contributing to the overall health and resilience of the forest. It's a complex, interconnected system that has emerged through a process of algorithmic growth, where each element plays a vital role in the web of life.
That's a beautiful analogy.
Yeah.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of everything.
It does.
It's like we're all part of this giant, ever-evolving algorithm, shaping and being shaped by the world around us.
And just like with our brains, the history track of our relationships, our communities, and our planet matters deeply. The choices we make today will have ripple effects that influence the trajectory of algorithmic growth for generations to come.
So it's not just about understanding how intelligence emerges. It's about understanding how we can harness this power of algorithmic growth to create a more just sustainable and thriving world for all.
Absolutely. By recognizing this interconnectedness and embracing those principles of algorithmic growth, we can become more conscious architects of our own future, shaping a world where technology and humanity can evolve together in harmony.
What an incredible and thought-provoking conversation this has been.
It has been.
It feels like we've only just dipped our toes into the vast ocean of knowledge surrounding algorithmic growth. But I think we've covered some truly mind-expanding concepts today.
I agree.
Now, we'll be back in just a moment to wrap up this deep dive and leave you with some final thoughts to ponder.
Okay, sounds good.
Stay with us. Well, I think my brain needs a little break after all of that.
It was a lot to cover.
That was a lot. But let's take a moment to recap what we've explored in this deep dive on algorithmic growth.
Okay.
We started by unpacking the idea of algorithmic growth itself and how it shapes the emergence of intelligence, both in our human brains and in, artificial systems. We talked about how heuristics, those mental shortcuts our brains love to use.
Our brains love patterns.
Are actually a product of this ongoing growth process, leading to both the brilliance and the biases.
It's a double-edged sword.
It really is of human cognition. And then we jumped into the exciting world of brain-machine interfaces, those technologies that are blurring the lines between human and machine.
It's really incredible to see how far it's come.
It is. We talked about the potential for these interfaces to, restore lost function and enhance our abilities and even allow us to interact with the digital world in ways we never thought possible.
Think about the possibilities.
But we also acknowledge the, ethical complexities.
Of course.
And the need to approach these advancements with careful consideration.
Absolutely. We have to be mindful of the implications.
It's not just about the technology. It's about how we use it and what it means for our humanity.
It's for our humanity. Yeah, exactly.
And we ended by contemplating the mind-blowing possibility of merging with AI.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big one.
A concept that forces us to confront the very essence of what it means to be human in this rapidly evolving technological landscape.
Absolutely.
It's a future that is both exhilarating and a little daunting to imagine.
I think so.
But what's crucial, I think, to remember is that algorithmic growth isn't just some, abstract scientific theory.
It's so much more than that.
It's this powerful lens through which we can view the world around us.
It helps us to connect the dots
Right.
and understand the bigger picture.
It helps us understand how everything is interconnected and how the choices we make today will shape the future.
Exactly. We have to be mindful of our actions.
Not just for ourselves,
Right.
but for generations to come.
It's about the legacy we leave behind.
And that brings us to our final thought for you to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. If intelligence is a product of algorithmic growth, and that growth is shaped by our experiences, our interactions, the information we encounter, what responsibility do we have to curate those inputs?
It's a great question.
Both for ourselves and for future generations.
I think it all comes down to awareness. Being conscious of the information we consume,
Right.
the choices we make, the impact we have on the world around us.
What books will we read?
Yeah. What conversations will we have?
Right. What values will we prioritize?
It's about shaping the future we want to see.
It's empowering to realize that we're not just passive recipients of information.
Right. We have agency.
We have the power to actively shape the very fabric of intelligence itself.
We are all architects of the future.
That's a great way to put it. As we venture into this uncharted territory of artificial intelligence and explore the frontiers of human potential, let's remember that the future isn't predetermined.
I agree.
It's a product of our collective algorithmic growth.
Right.
And we have the responsibility and the opportunity to shape it for the better.
It's a journey we're all on together.
And that's it for today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of algorithmic growth.
My pleasure.
And its implications for the future of intelligence. We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity.
It certainly has mine.
And inspired you to continue exploring these fascinating concepts.
Absolutely.
Until next time.